This is the Public Works Committee over here. This gets us to the agenda. This gives us to the notes.
All right, we'll call to order the September Public Works Committee meeting at our new location at the Brentwood School District Conference Center. Public's always welcome here. Roll call, please.
Alderman Leahy.
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderman Parker Tice. Here. Alderman Weggie.
Here.
All present.
All right, thank you. We have approval of the agenda. I believe we've got one of the items we're going to put on hold. It's item 10C.
Yes.
So if we, by acclamation, the amended agenda, is that all right with everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so which will be no announcements, appointments. We'll move on to citizen comment. Anybody from the audience like to come up and say their piece? I see no one, no new faces, so we'll move on to chairman and alderman reports. My report, Dan, I'd like to thank you for taking on Alderman Kramer's request for, at least sprucing up and filling up some of the cracks over there in Hanley Industrial Court. I think it looks a lot better and a lot more drivable, let's just put it that way. So thank you. Anybody else? Move on to Alderman Leahy.
No report.
Alderwoman Parker Tice.
I would just like to commend Eric, one of our neighbors down the street, has a son who was interested in parks and sort of natural parks and put together a proposal, and the mom talked about how you had like a real meeting with him and sat down and had him in the conference room, and how impressed she was with how you treated him then, I think, second grader, he's in third grade now, with such respect, and I just wanted to acknowledge that and say thank you.
Alderman Wiggy.
Just there's a neighborhood meeting for the sewage work that's happening for the MSD on September 25th at the community center. And Dan, I don't know, is there one for the Bridgeport work? Are you familiar with that at all?
Yeah, but they haven't scheduled one yet.
Okay, but there is one for the
There
Douglas
will be.
Court and the Chafford Woods on
Yes.
the 25th. That's it.
All right. Move on to department reports. We got the Parks Department. Eric, I believe you have something regarding a concern also of Alderman Kramer regarding fencing around one of the playgrounds.
Yes. I don't think this is on.
I think they're all hot.
I might have to turn this on. Well, I'm going to go with that until someone tells me what to do. Sorry, I am not a AV person.
He says you're good.
All right, well, good. So I was asked to, the department was asked to look at putting up a fence around the top playground in Memorial Park. And I thought I was going to have AV with me, and I apologize, or I would have brought you guys some maps. But the top playground is that smaller playground north of, near Strassner Road. And the concern is that, that Alderman Kramer brought to you guys is that his concern was maybe kids running off onto Strassner Drive. And so if you can kind of look, the thought of what we did, what we were looking at is the pathway of maybe bringing it from this walkway here around and across, which would be about 100 square linear feet. So that's what we're looking at as a way of a deterrent to kind of keep it there. As just a reference, from the closest point to Strassner is about 50 feet. So you're looking at 50 feet of green space before you hit Strassner Drive. So we got an estimate for about a commercial grade 16 gauge playground fencing without insulation would be about $2,000, $4,000 for labor. If we contracted it out, staff may be able to install the fence themselves, but we would need some specialized equipment, basically a specialized piece of equipment with an auger attachment that we need to be rented, dig holes to set the fence poles. And obviously we need 2 or 3 staff at a time to, so it'd take a few days to kind of set it up, which we'd be happy to do if we needed to. The other part of it is that there are some other important projects that we had prioritized above this one. The fence at Broughton Park, which obviously is a little bit closer, that fence is kind of falling apart. benches and picnic tables that are a little bit more dangerous as well across the park system that were in the FY19 budget. But if we want to do this, obviously we can reprioritize and move forward. So that is what we have brought to you guys, and it's an informational memo, and wanted to know what you guys thought.
Questions for Andy?
You just ran your summer parks program down at the park. Did you all experience any problem that putting a fence in now is immediate necessity versus can I put it in the 2020 budget and work it in that way?
We did not have any issues. Now that's the Y program, and obviously they're very highly supervised, and those kids are a little bit older compared to kind of a top child, a 3-year-old who might get away while a parent's sitting on the bench. I think that might be the difference between what Alderman Kramer's talking about.
I'm not opposed to putting a fence up to help slow them down. I'm trying to determine whether it's worth jumping it ahead of everything or keeping it in, let's get it in next year's budget and plan it and get it done. I mean, February, March weather is good enough to work with. I'm trying to think, you've got one pipe that we know of that comes through that area. Would that interfere with a post going down? That for the park, I think we've got a water line that runs into the one building that's there.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a danger because you're not setting it that deep.
Yeah.
You know, to be honest, you know, Alderman Kramer's the first request we've gotten to do this.
That was my question.
But obviously, since it was requested and we were asked to bring back the information, we've done so. It is something that we've looked at. It is something we'd like to add. It's just where we prioritize. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So just so I'm clear on this, Eric, the cost of materials will be $2,000, possibly less. That's an estimate.
Yep.
And then the $4,000, that's if we use a contractor to put it in?
Correct.
But if we use possibly Public Works guys, we could?
We use our own staff and then rent the specialized piece of equipment. It obviously be cheaper.
Right.
Just time.
No, the location of the kids' playground so close to Strassner, and the way Strassner has gotten to be practically a drag strip as far as the cars go now, going through there. I think Alderman Kramer, and I kind of agree with him, had some concerns. Even his child got away from him. That's what kind of drew his attention to this. I'm just wondering if it's possible, if there's do you foresee any savings in the way of $2,000 that maybe if we use our own guys, you might be able to do something by year's end?
Like anything else, I mean, we can always, you know, not purchase something else to kind of fit this in, and then if we have savings, we can move things around. You know, we're always trying to get as much done as we can. I mean, as we've talked about in our kind of our parks kind of update that we gave, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, we have about 80 projects we want to get done. I mean, right. So I mean, we'll continue to do projects as we go throughout the years, and this didn't make the cut for this year. Now we can always bump it up, move something down, and then again, as there's savings, and bump the whatever got down back up. So it is, I mean, that project list is just kind of a rolling list of what can we get done with what funding and how much time we can get it done with. There's a lot to do in the parks right now.
I would say, I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours at this playground in my life, and this is the first time I've heard this concern. So I would be okay not prioritizing it to the top, but
yeah.
You know, if it's something you feel we need to do at some point in the future, but I don't think it's super urgent.
I would concur with that. It's been a long time since, with my youngest being 14, it's been a long time, but I did spend many hours at that playground as well, and I think because of the running path, it does feel like there's a little bit of a break before you get to Strassner, and if this is something that we could, I don't know where it is on your priority list, but if it stays on your priority list and
safety is always on the top, so yeah. I mean, I think safety over sort of the stuff. So the other stuff we've talked about were all safety concerns.
Or safety. I mean, if there's somebody's going to get cut and some sort of infection on an old park bench, then that's a different kind of safety issue. Right. So that's my thought.
I think definitely you're looking at, if we don't do it this year, it'll either be 20 or 21, yeah. So it's coming pretty quick.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Move on to, well, Bull, I guess I skipped over you.
Oh, I have no report.
All right. Public Works Department, Dan, I think you had something.
Yeah, I'm sure most of you are aware that Bates Utility shut down Strassner just west of Black Creek Bridge. They started that Monday. So the first notifications went out. YMCA didn't get a notification. They dropped off equipment on their parking lot, so I went and had a meeting on Monday. They moved everything. They started Monday excavating. Yesterday, they found that the pipe size is not what they thought it was or what MSD told them it would be. So instead of an 8-inch clay, there's a 12 by 15-inch clay that runs right where the repair joint is. So because there's two different pipe sizes, what they were planning on doing is just doing a spot repair. Then the second contractor, SAK, would come through and line the 8-inch. Well, they can't line two different pipe sizes, so they're building a manhole over the top of that transition joint. So tomorrow they'll pour the base. Saturday they want to work and start building the manhole pieces up, and then they'll backfill around the manhole and then work next week to get the road open, because ultimately they were supposed to be done with the road this week. That's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen Saturday. So hopefully early part of next week they'll have everything backfilled, because they still have to put in concrete as a base and then 2 inches of asphalt over it to open it back up. And then we'll have to go back out and redo those thermoplastic stripes because they're all torn up.
Will that be, oh, sorry.
What?
Oh,
Will that be finished by the Brentwood Days run?
that's what I told them that they're up against, because we've got, I'm going to be shutting down High School Drive next week to do the box culvert repair just south of Brentwood. So I really don't like having two things closed down that take decent amount of traffic. High school takes a lot, and so does Strassner. Strassner to the greater extent. They did put out, I don't know if you've been out there, there's message boards. So before you get to Urban, it says that the bridge is closed, but the YMCA Memorial Park is open. I had them put that up closer, because all they had before was just a road closed sign. So that messed with the daycare. There's an early childhood development daycare at the west end of YMCA. So we seem to have made the Y happy. I think people are okay with getting to Memorial Park, but you can't take Strassner as a cut through between Hanley and Brentwood Boulevard. So.
Any other questions for Dan? Thanks for the
Okay.
update, Dan. Thank you. Move on to our consent agenda. We just have the minutes, so if any, we can approve by acclamation. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so approved. New business, item number A, or letter A, would be Hanley Park Court improvements, and that's you, Eric.
So we're asking for approval to choose a contractor for the Hanley Park Courts Improvement Project. As you know, we included $350,000 in the budget this year for the project, which includes removal of the handball, sand volleyball, and tennis courts, and replacing them with improved sand volleyball courts, a basketball court, a tennis practice wall, and a new entry plaza. We did include 4 bid alternates, including drinking fountain, site furnishings, which is benches and garbage cans, sod instead of seed, and then installation of court lighting. And we talked about the court lighting at our meeting in, I think it was April. And the conversation at that time was at the April 10th Public Works meeting. And the conversation at that time was we didn't think we'd have enough money in the budget this year. But the idea was to put it as a bid alternate just to kind of get a cost and then see what we'd be able to put in the budget for next year. And so we advertised the project for over 4 weeks. We also emailed 11 different contractors to try to get some interest in the project. We did receive 2 bids. VJ was the lowest. The base bid was $327,000. Also showed you the alternate bids, and we had the bid tabulation involved as well. As we talked, the timing of the project would go to the board in that first meeting in October, which means we're going to the end of the year, which means we think that they wouldn't finish up the project till December. Our hope is that if the board would agree, the committee agree, and the board would agree, we could still accept the light alternate with the caveat that would be done starting in January. I think we could talk to the contractor and say, hey, if we accept this alternate, we want the work to start in January 1 and be billed in January. And I think they'd be receptive to that. So that way we can get it all done in one package and then not have to rebid next year and save some time and probably some cost savings since it's going to be all together in one package. So we're recommending VJ, as I said. They've worked with a number of municipalities, Clayton, DePere, Kirkwood, Manchester, Richmond Heights, Tower Grove on similar projects. And so they're all, we did a number of reference checks, we're all satisfied with VJ. So that is our recommendation.
Eric, there were some concerns expressed regarding the current plan not fitting what was in the master plan, Parks master plan. Could you kind of go over some of the difficulties that were found when in the planning?
When we talked about, when we talk about the master plan, and obviously the master plan is a great tool and something that I try to follow as much as possible. But when you do the master plan, you don't do a full-scale survey of all your parks. You don't kind of look in deep in depth. It's just basically an overview of what you're going to try to do, and you can kind of get public input. And so there's two reasons we decided, or we kind of moved the tennis courts out of Hanley Park. And the first was when we installed the dog park a couple of years ago, when we constructed the dog park, we did a full survey of Hanley Park just to make sure there were no easements, no piping, all this fun stuff that you have to do whenever you do a project. And what we found was, unfortunately, there's MSD piping on the side of Hanley Park with all the sports courts. And if you, I think I put in the drawings, if you look at drawing C20, that dotted line that goes back around the back end, the south end of the two tennis courts, the SS, that's a sanitary sewer line. And so that's what's running through those tennis courts. And as we know, if MSD ever needs to get access to those pipes, they have the right to rip up whatever's under or over them to get to it. And so at that time, the decision was we can't put anything over those pipes. The sand volleyball courts isn't as bad if you're talking about sand and subgrade underneath that. That's not as tough to replace, obviously. So at that point, we talked to, when we're talking about design, we're figuring out what we can do to kind of replace it, or what we could do with that site. And a decision was made that putting tennis courts back there was going to be difficult. Knowing that a basketball court was in the master plan, we could still use some of that space to still add an amenity which was in the master plan, albeit in a different location. The second issue, that concern of why we wanted to do it, was the base of the tennis court. So asphalt is a tough in Missouri. So when you have asphalt tennis courts, you got to make sure you don't have any water seeping up through. And so a lot of times what you'll see is if you don't have a good subgrade, and if you have a lot of water in that soil, and if water seeps through, that's where you get cracking in tennis courts. I did a lot of research in tennis courts when I was doing that work in Clayton for the Shaw Park tennis courts. And so what happens is basically if any water seeps up, if you have wet soil or if you're in a floodplain like we are in Hanley Park, water just starts coming up sooner or later through your subgrade. And once it gets through your subgrade, asphalt will crack. And so if you see our tennis courts, that's what's happened over time. And no matter what you do, if you just resurface, you'll get cracks back right away. There's different things you can put, there's crack fillers, things like that. It's not going to matter, you're still going to crack. You put in a new subgrade, you tighten up as much as you can, that will help for a little while. Water's still going to seep up, you're still going to find it, it's still going to crack. So ultimately, putting in asphalt courts in a place that water's going to seep through is just not a good use of city funds, in my opinion. And so when we first talked about tennis courts down there, we were talking about post-tension concrete. That has become sort of the industry standard in the Midwest because you don't have that water seeping through. Kirkwood, Clayton, Tower Grove Park, Dwight Davis, I mean, almost every place in Missouri that has done new DePere, any place that's done tennis courts in St. Louis have now gone to post-tension. The issue of post-tension is they're more expensive. They'll last a heck of a lot longer, which is the issue. That's the benefit. You also put a crack line. You actually do a saw crack in between your courts, and you actually tell your courts where you want it to crack. And so it gives you your cracks between the courts instead of right down the middle of the I'm probably saying way too much about tennis courts. I apologize.
No.
It's something that I learned a lot of. The other issue is that you need a little bit bigger of a area to do post-tension, because obviously you need that area to do the post-tension of the concrete. And so again, the last thing you want to do is put post-tension anywhere near MST pipes or an MST easement. So if you look on page C21, you'll see not only the pipe, but also that 10-foot easement that MST has. So again, it's not only the pipe we have to worry about, it's their easement. So that's why we decided that Hanley Park's probably not the best place for tennis courts. I love tennis. I played tennis in high school, would have played in college if I could find a good doubles partner, because I'm not a good singles player. So it's someplace I want to find a good place in Brentwood to put tennis courts again. Or can we work an agreement with someone? Could it be Clayton? Could it be the swim club? Could it be somewhere else? Can we work on a partnership somehow to figure out a usage work? So that's something we can look at too. But unfortunately, I just didn't think Hanley Park was the best part, which is why we made that change in the budget. So,
All right.
sorry, long answer.
Thank you.
Brandon? No?
The water fountain, was that for the dog park, or was that for a water fountain at the sports
No,
complex?
it's water fountain here. The dog park water fountain should be installed in the next couple weeks, actually.
Okay, and what you're proposing is not to include the water fountain?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're real tight in budget, and again, we'll get it in there at some point, but I just didn't want to go over budget.
But the bathroom building with running water would remain, so there's a
Yep.
water fountain like
There's water
10
fountain
feet
there.
away.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Andy?
The problem I have with this is the price of what we're looking at. Yes, I agree, see if we can sneak the lighting into 2020. But you also throw in a request to add another $24,000 plus for overrun cost, which would cover either of the two items that aren't being covered right now to work with. And I'm trying to get my hands around, why do we think we'll have a $24,000 potential overrun on the cost?
With any construction project, there's always those unvariables that you don't know. I mean, as we've talked about in some of the other projects, the city has a history of throwing unsuitable materials in the parks. I mean, with
Some of our landfilling efforts have been a little screwed.
and so when that happens, you know, there's then the haul-off fees that we have to pay for,
Okay.
and things like that. And that's stuff you just don't know going into a project. I mean, we do core samples, we kind of know. We put in variables for those type of things, knowing some of those things. But there's just sometimes, I'd rather have that cushion than basically not having it. And so we try very hard to not. I'd say on most of the projects, going back to even the rec center, we haven't used all of it, but it's just the idea of making sure we have something there as a buffer, and then not having to come back to the committee and slowing down the project, and basically having the authority to sign off on those small or change orders.
In a fiscal budget arrangement that I'm looking at, you're at a $350,000 budget is what we gave you for 2019. But you're at 410 plus 24, so you're at 435,000. So you're another $70,000 over what we've budgeted. Yeah, we're squeezing money into the 2020 budget, but how do I keep that contingency money just at that, a contingency, not expanding the scope of the project to pick up more things to make it,
Well,
or am I handcuffing it, and I shouldn't be?
no, the idea of, first of all, the lights is that it would be budgeted in 2020, and that's the idea is
Yes.
that the idea of asking for the alternate now so that you don't have to go out and bid and then most likely get a higher cost. So it would come out of the 2020 budget. I budget it, it'd be part of my budget for next year. So it wouldn't be part of this budget at all.
Okay.
They would not start construction on that part of it until January 1, and wouldn't bill us until the end of January. Part of that is just to make sure we stay within that 350. The reason I didn't ask for the water fountain and kept it at 327 was so I wouldn't go over my 350 budget.
Okay. I understand where you're going. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to forward on to the board.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, Eric,
Thank you.
moving along, all right. Let's go to, get back here. I think you're still with us, Eric, for item B, where we're talking about adjusting our rates for park, or for the recreation.
I am. So every year we do an annual review of fees being charged by the city of Brentwood, Parks and Recreation Department. What we do is we compare our rental fees against municipal fees, other municipal facilities, and private facilities as well. Basically, our pricing recommendation is based on a strategy that fees should be in line with cost of services, and then it's part of our mission. So we try to set fees that are affordable to our member and communities, making sure that we have facilities that enhance basically the city of Brentwood, and try to cover as much of the operating costs of the department as possible. You know, as a side note, when I first got here, our operating revenue was about $650,000 a year. We're now over $1 million, so we've increased about $350,000 in the past 3 years through fees and charges. That's not through increases, obviously. We've done a lot more. We're doing a lot of fun and unique things, so a lot of that is a testament to my staff as well. So some of the things we've looked at for this year is, the first is the galley kitchen. The galley kitchen is not the kitchen off of A that's, if you've been in the rec center, it's a small kitchen off of meeting room B that people in either room B or room C will use for their rentals. And so while we never had this room before, we can't really ever say there's been an increase because we never had it before. But looking at kind of a small kitchen like that, Clayton's really high. They probably have a bigger kitchen than what we've talked about. Richmond Heights is the low, but they're renting it per hour. So we'd be right in line with what other people are doing. So we feel that we can make for an additional, make a little bit more money and be kind of in line, and people are using it a lot. So it'd be a nice little way to increase a little bit of funding. The second is the Brentwood ice rink. And we're looking kind of like the prime ice rental rate and the daily fees. And the two reasons for this is the prime ice rental rate is, if you kind of look at where we're at compared to kind of our main competitors, which is Creve Coeur, Kirkwood, and Webster Groves, we're still kind of right around the main. We're still kind of below where everyone else is. Creve Coeur is still the lowest. That's because they're still an old rink and haven't done a whole lot of renovation, but they're even talking about increasing their rates this year. We're also coming up against 2 brand new facilities who are going to be charging, from what we're understanding, around $200 or $250 a piece. So we're not too worried about those fees because they're going to be higher than everyone in the St. Louis municipal market. So that's good news for us. The ice rink daily fees, we were talking about that. The big thing about that is you see that we're still below most people, and then the talk about that is really one is to kind of combat the increase to part-time staff expenditures due to increased Missouri minimum wage. So we did increase last year. Most of the municipal ice rinks around us did, so we're kind of the last one we wanted to try to maintain, see where we're at. But as part-time staff increases go up, price of wage goes up, we kind of need to see what we can do to offset those prices. So those are our recommendations, and we're happy to take any questions.
Andy?
Go ahead.
Thank you. When you have down here both resident, non-resident, youth, adult, senior, how do we define that non-resident term? We're in the park agreement with Richmond Heights and Maplewood. Do their residents get residence rates?
Yes, they do.
And we track the numbers of who and coming through on those, or we just go zip code, yeah, give him the rate?
No, we track Brentwood residents, and then we track park. So we track Richmond Heights and Maplewood as one lump.
if you can get me those numbers, I'd be interested in seeing those.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's the only question I have.
Brandon?
Eric, there's a note about program fees and programming. That is for if you have to develop the program, any kind of advertising, that's not rentals, right? Where you-
Correct.
It says it's
Yeah,
reviews.
program fees, we kind of look at on a regular basis. We actually, we do what's called an inverted pyramid theory of programming. So if it's a highly specialized program, so private lessons, you're gonna, we charge the most.
Okay.
If it's something that we consider a community asset, kind of youth programming, we charge the least, and we don't worry about as much of making money off of
But
it.
that's development of the program, not the rental of the
Correct.
facility, right? Because the facility is set resident or non-resident.
Correct.
And do we offer, I forget, do the library get any kind of discount there? Do we ever decide that, or?
I don't think we ever
We
did
just
make
charge
that
them a
decision.
resident? Okay.
We only give the school the discount. We've given the school usage at almost a no fee.
Basically,
individual
anytime
events,
that
though.
anyone wants a reduced or free rental, it has to go through BOLA and then the board for approval, is how, is the way the policy currently reads.
Good, okay, thanks.
All right. Motion to allow Eric to raise his rates. Eric,
So moved.
have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. 10C was put on hold, so citizen comment, and I've seen no one else come in the room since the last time. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Close all
Great.
tabs. Now, I'm curious, because we are now logged in on this guy,
Next time you come, you'll just, it'll
because
just
he's
turn
in
on.